Movember began on a Sunday afternoon in Melbourne, Australia. It was a conversation between my brother and a good mate, Luke. And they were sitting there having a few beers talking about fashion and recurring trends and how over time everything pretty much manages to come back into style. A couple more beers and the conversation turned to, why has the moustache never made a comeback? So, a couple more beers, and the day ended with a challenge and a social experiment in 2003 to bring back the moustache. And Mo is slang for moustache in Australia, so that's where Movember took over November. And the rules were created: start the month clean shaven, then grow a moustache for the 30 days. So in 2003, there were 30 of us that did that. And this is before the ironic moustache hipster movement. And it caused an amazing amount of conversation and controversy. My boss wouldn't let me go and see clients. My girlfriend at the time, who's no longer my girlfriend, hated it. And we were just really shocked by the stigmas associated with growing a moustache. And in 2004, 4 of us got together and thought, why don't we put this toward some sort of a cause? And we were inspired by the women around us and all they were doing for breast cancer. And we just thought there is nothing for men's health. And largely, when you take away Movember, there is still nothing for men's health on any sort of national scale. So we started researching it, and we found that prostate cancer is essentially the male equivalent of breast cancer in terms of the number of men that are diagnosed from it, and sadly the number of men that pass from it. But there was clearly a huge gap in terms of funding and awareness that goes to that cause. So prostate cancer became our go-to cause, and along the way we developed our tagline, which is changing the face of men's health. And that describes a challenge, changing your appearance, but it also describes what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to get men to change their level of engagement in their health, change their level of understanding, and change the help-seeking behaviours toward their health. Get men to go to the doctor when they're feeling sick, go to the doctor for an annual health checkup. So in 2004, I convinced the CEO of the Prostate Cancer Foundation in Australia to meet with me. I didn't want to share my grand vision over the phone, so we had coffee. And I said, my idea is to get men across Australia growing moustaches, raising awareness and funds for your organisation, which we needed a partnership to do. And we'd come together at the end of the month and have a moustache-themed party with DJs, 80s themed, and we'll have a celebration of life and what it meant to be a man. And he just looked at me and laughed. And he said, you know, we're a really conservative organisation. We've got our membership is 55-year-old plus men. They're not going to be interested in this. I wish you all the best. And so I paid for coffee that day. And he shook my hand, but his parting comment was, if you happen to raise any money, we'll gladly take it. So in 2004, we had 450 guys that rose to the challenge and grew, and we raised around $40,000. So it was each guy raising about $150 each, and that metric still stands today. And that was the single biggest donation they'd ever received in their history. So what I want to show you now is just our journey, and then I'll share with you how we came to Canada. And this is another example of how we tell our story. Volume. Thank you. So what started as a joke and Bring Back the Moustache is now the biggest global funder of prostate cancer research and support programs in the world, and we're only just getting going. In 2007, we had a lot of interest from men in Canada, and that's when I jumped on our pirate ship and sailed across here. And I remember meeting with the CEO of Prostate Cancer Canada and shared with him my vision of getting men across Canada growing moustaches. And he looked at me and laughed and said, "That's a novel idea." And I stopped him. I said, "I know where that's going. Like, trust me. And it was so great last year to experience Movember truly becoming a global movement and Canada becoming the #1 country in the world. We raised $42 million here alone in Canada last year. So I want to talk about the elements that make up, from our experience, a successful fundraising organisation. We don't use the term not-for-profit at Movember. I think it's a wrong term. We're all about profit. It's just where the profit goes is very, very different. So there's 3 elements, in my view, to a successful fundraising organisation. Obviously, there is a fundraising component, and for us, that's the power of the moustache, and it's how we brand and project ourselves. In no Movember literature will you see any fear-based campaigns. There'll never be 1 in 7 men will get prostate cancer, therefore grow a moustache. It is all about change and inspiring men to be part of this movement to create change. And that's been a big difference with us compared to the vast majority of other charities that use fear-based tactics to get people engaged in their cause. It's also how we protect our brand, and we're very, very brand focused, and that goes to who we partner with and through our sponsorships. And we don't ask our sponsors for cash. We ask them firstly to promote Movember participation throughout their organisation, and then to invest in the campaign to help us promote it and reach who we want to reach, which is all the men in Canada to grow a moustache. The other thing, even though we've raised a lot of money, is we don't really focus on fundraising. We focus on participation and engagement. And by virtue of engagement and the power of our technology platform, that gets men engaged and fundraising. And we've brought in deliberately a number of competitive elements to help facilitate that. So the fundraising element in our campaign was what we focused on initially in Australia as we grew. It was year 3, we'd raised $1 million, and we were just doing this part-time and voluntary capacity. Then we realized we had to get our back office in order. And that was very, very important to establish a great board of engaged and passionate people that could help us, particularly with the corporate governance, also setting key executive salaries. The other part none of us had great experience in was the finance side. So we got PricewaterhouseCoopers on board, and we got KPMG on board here. And we wanted the best partners in that space possible, because we knew that was a potential weakness for us. And we focus heavily on our fundraising and administration cost ratios. And in Canada, they run at 6 cents in the dollar. Now, world's best practice is between 15 and 25 cents in the dollar. So to run at that level, we're exceptionally proud about, and that enables us to push more of the funds, 94 cents in the dollar, toward programs. The other part, so initially we focused on the fundraising campaign side of Movember in our organisation. Then we realised we needed to focus on the back office. And then what was critically important to us was then to focus on the program side. It's not that we didn't have a focus on that, because ultimately that's why we exist. But in terms of where our priorities sat, And I see so many organizations in this space fail because they fail in one of these three sectors. So the program side is critically important. And it's something in Canada that we've focused on a lot over the 18 months, the last 18 months. Prostate Cancer Canada, before Movember, their annual revenues were around $4 to $5 million for all their fundraising campaigns throughout the year. Last year, Movember raised $42 million, and they're our sole partner. That fundamentally transforms what that organization can do and what we can do for prostate cancer in Canada. So we've had a great focus over the last 18 months in building the very best committees and advisory groups to develop a comprehensive national prostate cancer research and support program strategy. And that's taken us time, but we've developed those strategies now, a research strategy and also a survivor support strategy. And now the money will start to flow. But we had to take stock and take time to build those strategies. But the emphasis here is a focus on each of those. And whilst we're focusing far more now on the program side here in Canada, we'll come, because we know the fundraising and campaign side is solid, we will come back to the fundraising and campaign side because we know through the experience in Australia, there becomes an element of fatigue with growing a moustache after you've done it a couple of times. So now we have more traditional fundraising elements to the campaign in Australia, like fund runs and other activities. This is a core focus for us at Movember. We call it our circles of trust. Our currency and why we exist is because people trust us. And the first and most important circle of trust exists between ourselves and Prostate Cancer Canada and the fundraisers, the Mobros and Sistas, who become engaged in our campaign and fundraise on behalf of it. For the men, by growing a moustache, and for the women, not necessarily growing a moustache, but they become team captains, and then they recruit all the men in their lives to be part of their team. That circle of trust is the most important part of this matrix. And so we, at every opportunity and at every time, reinforce that circle of trust. And a large part of reinforcing that is that these circles that exist out to the researchers, and then ultimately the men that we serve, the men and their families going through the prostate cancer journey. And I'm going to talk about male mental health later. The last circle of trust there, which is quite hard to influence, is the circle of trust that exists between the fundraiser and the donor. That's their friends, their family, and their work colleagues. So the core is inspiring the fundraisers and maintaining the circle of trust with them. Because if that circle of trust is broken, you don't even have the circle of trust that exists between the fundraiser and the donor. Let me catch up here. All right, thanks. So let me talk about the program side. So at Movember, we have 3 program areas: awareness and education, survivor support programs, and then research. People always ask us, well, what do you mean by awareness and education? This, to me, is our most important program, and it's by virtue of participation. By virtue of men growing a moustache, they become highly engaged in their health because they're explaining why they're growing a moustache every single day. So they're out there and they become walking, talking billboards for men's health, become advocates for their own health, and they talk to their dads and their uncles about their health. And we get so many stories of men during the month of Movember that have one conversation that changes the life of someone. And it often happens at a dinner conversation toward the end of the month, where they'll be having a conversation about their moustache. That turns into a conversation around prostate cancer, and then a question to their dad or their uncle whether they've had an annual checkup lately and prostate cancer screening. And so many of those conversations end in a guy going and having a prostate cancer screen and found to have prostate cancer. And that prostate cancer, like many cancers, is highly treatable if caught early. But the issue with prostate cancer is there's typically no symptoms until it moves beyond the prostate. So those conversations inspired by a moustache are so critically important, and they're changing and saving lives today. The next part is around providing a range of services to support men going through the prostate cancer journey. One of the challenges we've got now is we don't have a great screening test. And so the treatment options for men when they're diagnosed with prostate cancer, it's largely up to the man to decide which option to go for. So we provide a range of services to help them and their family navigate that decision and provide support to them through treatment and then life after treatment. The next area is research. And we do research at two levels, at a national level here through Prostate Cancer Canada, and I talked about the national research strategy that we've recently developed, and then at a global level. I'll come back to that in a sec. But, so I said we've focused a lot on programs over the last 18 months in Canada. Last year the campaign raised $42 million, and it's now at a size where we can support 2 funded causes. So we're supporting and will always support prostate cancer, but we're adding now male mental health. It's probably appropriate that I follow you. We're not jumping on the bandwagon here. We've supported male mental health in Australia and New Zealand since 2006. And people ask us, well, why male mental health? That's a disease that affects men and women. In fact, more women suffer from some sort of mental illness than men. But when you look at the statistics, sadly, 4 to 5 times as many men commit suicide than women. And it is one of the fundamental drivers why, on average, Canadian men live 5 years younger than women because of youth suicide. So this is now a funded cause for us. So half the funds raised from this campaign moving forward will go to support male mental health. And we're not going to have one partner in this space like we do on prostate cancer. What we're doing is creating a network across Canada of multiple organisations, and that network is being headed up by Dr. Larry Goldenberg out of Vancouver. So after this year's campaign, we're already in the process of reaching out to organisations to be included in that network, and depending on how the campaign goes this year, but even if it was the same as last year, we'll see around $20 million being invested in male mental health just from this year's campaign in Canada. So that's what I mean by our focus now on the program side and absolutely getting that right, because that is intrinsically linked to the campaign side and the longevity of Movember. I touched on research. So research, it's interesting. When you tell people, oh, you fund research, the vast majority of people go, oh, that's great. But when you dive into it, cancer research is really interesting / disappointing. We looked at it about 3 years ago. We were funding at that stage prostate cancer research in 10 countries. And now we're funding in about 20 countries. And so we went to all these researchers that we were funding and said, and we asked them what they were funding, just from a lay perspective. And there became these common themes around the world of what they were all researching. And then we said to them, hey, do you know there's a guy in Toronto and Montreal and London and Sydney and Melbourne that are and Boston and Chicago and LA that are fundamentally researching the same thing? And the answer was no. That, even though they were researching the same things with our money, they didn't know each other, let alone collaborate with each other. When you look at the cancer research world and the way it's built, they compete for grants, finite grants, they get written up in journals, and the whole thing is competitive and not collaborative. So we've changed the rules now around our funding for research, and it has to be collaborative. At the level we fund, which is the basic exploratory science, it has to be collaborative. And what we've done as well is taken now 10% of what's raised in each country, and that goes into a global fund. We have 8 of the best prostate cancer minds in the world, represented from across the world, that come together for 2 days and decide what's the #1 priority that could best benefit from collaboration. And we now have 2 programs funded, and these guys are working together. We've built an online platform, so sort of think of LinkedIn meets a wiki-based forum, so they collaborate online. We have quarterly phone calls and annual conferences. What they're researching is exceptionally complex, but the way they were going about it was like 20 years ago. So I want to play this short little video about GAP to explain it just a little bit further.
Movember's vision is to have an everlasting impact on men's health. To do this, we needed a new way of thinking and a plan. In an unprecedented international effort, we devised the Movember Global Action Plan, or GAP. The GAP initiative brings the smartest prostate cancer researchers together to share ideas and work towards a common goal. Prostate cancer is the most common cancer affecting men globally. This meeting of the minds accelerates research by unlocking a new level of knowledge sharing and global collaboration, working towards a point when no man should die of this disease. GAP, the Movember Global Action Plan.
So that's what we're doing on the program side. What I wanted to do briefly is introduce you to this year's campaign theme, which is titled Movember and Sons. So each year we have a campaign theme. 3 years ago it was all around the modern gentleman, and last year it was around the country gentleman. And this year it's about Movember and Sons. And this is about the father and son relationship. It's about growing up. Ideally, your father figure will pass knowledge down to you as a child, and as you grow up, you embrace that knowledge, and there becomes a pivotal point in your life where you're able to share knowledge back up to your dad. And this year's campaign is all about the father-son challenge, the father-son relationship, and us passing knowledge to that generation and getting them engaged and aware of the health risks that they face, particularly prostate cancer, but also now their mental health as well. And this is in part inspired by my brother and myself relationship with our dad. And it's amazing now, when my dad goes to the doctor, he calls me and says, my PSA score was this, my cholesterol level's a little bit high, I know I drink too much beer, but I'm watching it. So it's a great campaign, we're very proud of it, and this just reinforces what I was talking about right at the start, about the power of storytelling and the power of inspiring people rather than trying to get them engaged through a fear-based, statistic-based campaign. So I'll just finish with what I know to be true from my journey is that there were 4 of us that started Movember in Melbourne, Australia, and we inspired a room full of people. And that room full of people went on to inspire a city, and then a state, and then a nation. And what we did create through that is a global movement. It's called Movember. So I know that if we can do it, anyone can do it. Thank you so much.